The morning I found the folded paper under the passenger seat of my own car. I thought it was a receipt. I almost threw it away without looking. Instead, something made me unfold it. It was a bill of sale. My car. My name crossed out with a single blue line. And underneath it, in my husband's handwriting, another name. Not mine. A woman's name I had heard exactly twice before, both times in passing. Both times dismissed as nothing. Vanessa. I sat in the driver's seat for 11 minutes without starting the engine. I know it was 11 minutes because I watched the clock on the dashboard the entire time. Waiting for my hands to stop shaking enough to hold the steering wheel. That paper was the first thread. By the end of that month, I would pull on it until an entire life came undone. A life I had spent 9 years building brick by brick while the people closest to me were quietly tearing it apart from the inside. My name is Amanda. I am 34 years old. And until that morning in my driveway, I believed my marriage was simply difficult. Not dishonest. There is a difference, and it took me far too long to learn it. This is the story of how my husband and his mother tried to sell the one thing in my life that was untouchable. The car I bought with my own hands, my own overtime shifts, my own exhaustion, and handed over to the woman my husband had been sleeping with for over a year. They thought I would never find out. They were wrong. And little do they know, by the time they realized what I had done, it was already too late for either of them to undo it. Let me take you back to where this all began. Because you need to understand what that car meant, and what I sacrificed to earn it. Before you understand why I was willing to burn my entire marriage to the ground rather than let them take it. I grew up in a small town outside Dayton, Ohio. The middle child of 5, in a house where money was a constant. Quiet worry that hummed beneath every conversation. My mother worked double shifts at a diner. My father drove a delivery truck until his knees gave out. And then he mostly sat in his recliner and apologized for things that were not his fault. I decided early that I would not live that way. I would have something that was mine, paid for by me. Owned by no one else, answerable to no one else. I became a nurse. Not because it was glamorous, but because it was steady. And because I liked the quiet dignity of taking care of people on their worst days. I worked in the cardiac unit of a hospital in Columbus for 6 years before I met Daniel. I want to be fair to him, because fairness matters. Even now, even after everything, Daniel was charming in a way that felt effortless. He sold real estate, he had a laugh that filled a room. And in the beginning, he made me feel like the center of something instead of the edges of it. We dated for 2 years before we married. In that time, I saved. I picked up every extra shift the hospital offered. I skipped vacations. I drove a car with over 200,000 miles on it. A car that stalled at red lights and needed a running start on cold mornings. And I told myself that every uncomfortable moment in that dying car was a deposit towards something better. When it finally gave out for good in a hospital parking lot, I did not panic. I had been waiting for exactly this moment for 3 years. I bought a 2021 Honda CR-V, silver, with cash I had saved entirely on my own. Before Daniel and I were even engaged. The title was in my name only. I remember the finance manager at the dealership double-checking that detail with me. Asking if I wanted to add anyone else to the paperwork. I said no, without hesitation. Something in me, some quiet instinct I did not examine too closely at the time, wanted this one thing to belong to no one but me. I have thought about that instinct many times since. I think some part of me always knew I would need proof. Someday, that at least one part of my life was untouchable. Daniel and I married 8 months after I bought that car. His mother, Carol, made her feelings about me clear from the engagement announcement onward. Though never directly. Carol was the kind of woman who delivered insults wrapped in concern. The kind who would tell you your dress was lovely and then ask, in the same breath, if you had considered a more flattering cut for your body type. She had raised Daniel alone after his father left when Daniel was 9. And she wore that sacrifice like armor, using it to justify an opinion on every decision her son ever made. Including, eventually, me. I tried. I want that understood clearly. I brought Carol soup when she had the flu. I remembered her birthday every year with a gift I chose myself. Not something Daniel picked up at the last minute. I sat through holiday dinners where she praised Daniel's ex-girlfriend's cooking while eating food I had spent 6 hours preparing. I told myself this was simply what it looked like to earn a place in a family. That patience would eventually soften her. Patience did not soften Carol. If anything, it seemed to convince her that I would tolerate anything. Which made her bolder. 2 years into the marriage, she started showing up at our house unannounced. Letting herself in with a key Daniel had given her without discussing it with me first. She rearranged my kitchen cabinets once while I was at work, explaining afterward that my system made no sense and she was only trying to help. Small things, each one dismissible on its own. Together, over years, they formed a pattern I was too tired and too committed to fully name. The warning signs with Daniel were quieter, and in hindsight, more dangerous. He started working later. Not occasionally, but as a steady new rhythm. 3 or 4 nights a week, always with an explanation that made sense on its own but stopped making sense stacked together. A closing that ran long. A client dinner. A colleague's crisis that only Daniel could solve. I believed him because doubting him felt like a betrayal of the trust one had promised him at our wedding. And because I was working my own long shifts and did not have the energy left over to interrogate his. There was a night, about a year before I found that bill of sale, when I noticed a new habit. Daniel had started keeping his phone face down on any surface. Every single time, even at home, even when we were simply watching television together. I asked him about it once, lightly, trying to keep my voice free of accusation. He said he did not like the glare of notifications catching his eye. It was a small, plausible answer. I let it go. I have replayed that conversation more times than I can count, wondering what would have happened if I had pushed instead of letting it go. Carol's behavior shifted too, in ways I noticed but could not yet interpret. She began asking pointed questions about my finances, phrased as casual curiosity. Had I paid off the car yet? Was my name the only one on the title? Did I keep the title at the house or somewhere else? At the time I assumed this was simply Carol being Carol. Intrusive by nature, needing to know everyone's business so she could comment on it. I did not yet understand that she was gathering information for a purpose. The escalation started small enough that I almost dismissed it entirely. I began finding things slightly out of place. My car's glove compartment, where I kept the title copy and registration, seemed to have been opened and closed by someone who was not careful about returning things to their exact position. I mentioned it to Daniel, who shrugged and said maybe I had done it myself and forgotten. I wanted to believe him. Wanting to believe someone is a powerful thing. It can make you doubt your own eyes. Then came the credit card statement. I handled our joint account bookkeeping, a task I had taken on early in the marriage because Daniel called himself hopeless with numbers. And I, foolishly, took a kind of pride in being the reliable one. One month, I found a charge from an auto detailing service. A full interior and exterior detail, on a day I had been at work and had not taken my car anywhere. I asked Daniel about it. He said he had taken my car in as a surprise, to have it cleaned before an anniversary dinner. It was a sweet story. I chose to be charmed rather than suspicious. Looking back, I understand now that he was preparing my car to be shown to someone else. Small discoveries began arriving with more frequency after that, each one easy to explain individually. Each one part of a pattern I refused to see as a whole because seeing it would have meant admitting my marriage was not what I had told myself it was. I found a receipt from a jewelry store I had never shopped at. For an amount too small to be for me and too specific to be for himself. Daniel said it was a gift for his mother. I found a hotel confirmation email that he closed quickly when I walked into the room, claiming it was for a work conference. I found, once, a lipstick shade in the center console of my own car that I did not own and had never owned. A deep berry color I would never have chosen. When I asked Daniel, he laughed and said it must have rolled in from a friend's purse when he gave someone a ride to their car after a work event. I remember thinking, even then, that it was an oddly specific and oddly rehearsed explanation for something so small. I did not confront him properly, not once, in those months. I want to be honest about that, because I think it matters. I was not naive. I noticed things. But I had built my entire adult identity around being the steady one. The reasonable one, the one who did not create scenes over small evidence. And I applied that same reasonableness to a situation that deserved suspicion. Not patience. I told myself that trust meant giving people the benefit of the doubt even when the doubt kept accumulating. I did not yet understand that trust without verification is simply hope wearing a disguise. The turning point, the moment the warning signs stopped being separate incidents and became a single unmistakable shape, happened on a Tuesday afternoon in early spring. I had swapped a shift with a coworker and come home 4 hours earlier than expected. Carol's car was in our driveway, which was not unusual on its own. But Daniel's car was also there, which was unusual, because he was supposed to be showing a property across town until 6. I walked into the kitchen and found them both at the table. Paper spread out between them, speaking in the low, careful tones people use when they do not want to be overheard. They both looked up at me with an expression I had never seen on either of their faces before. A flash of something caught, quickly smoothed over into forced casualness. Daniel closed a folder with his hand flat against it. A motion too quick to be natural. Carol said, brightly, that they were just going over some paperwork for his mother's estate planning. Nothing to worry about. I did not push. I made myself a cup of tea and went upstairs. And I told myself the story they had given me. Because it was easier than the alternative. But something in my body did not believe it. Even as my mind tried to accept it. That night, after Daniel had fallen asleep, I lay awake replaying the image of that folder closing under his hand. And the specific flicker of fear I had seen cross Carol's face. A woman who did not usually fear anything. 2 weeks later, I found the bill of sale under my own passenger seat. I do not know exactly how it ended up there. I have a theory, formed later once I understood more, that Daniel had been carrying it to a meeting, perhaps with Vanessa. Perhaps with a buyer or a title office, and it had slipped from a folder or a jacket pocket while he was moving something else out of my car. Whatever the reason, it was there, half tucked under the seat track. And I found it while looking for a dropped earring on an ordinary Thursday morning. I stared at that paper in my driveway for a long time. My name, printed clearly as the registered owner, had a single line drawn through it in blue ink. And beneath it, in Daniel's handwriting, was written a new name. Vanessa Cole. There was a dollar amount listed, far below the actual value of the car. The kind of number you write when you are not truly selling something but simply transferring it. Disguising a gift as a transaction to make it look legitimate on paper. My first reaction was not the explosive kind you might expect from a story like this. It was a strange, cold stillness, the same stillness I have felt in hospital rooms when a monitor's alarm goes off and you have exactly one choice: to move calmly and correctly, or to fall apart and be useless to everyone including yourself. I folded the paper carefully along its original creases and put it in my bag. I did not confront Daniel that morning. I drove to work in my other car. The older one we still kept for errands, because for reasons I could not fully articulate yet. I did not want to be seen driving the Honda that day. Over the following week, I began paying attention in a way I had not allowed myself to before. I am a nurse. I know how to observe without announcing that I am observing. I noted the exact days Daniel worked late and cross-referenced them quietly against a work calendar he had once shared with me on our shared cloud account and never thought to remove. The pattern was unmistakable once I let myself see it. Every late night correlated with a cancelled or absent appointment on that shared calendar. Meaning wherever he was, it was not where he claimed. I found Vanessa's name properly for the first time during that week. Not in passing anymore, but deliberately searched. She worked at the same real estate office as Daniel. A marketing coordinator, 29 years old, unmarried, with a public social media account that told me more in 20 minutes than Daniel had told me in months. There were photographs, careful and cropped, that showed the edge of a familiar hand on her shoulder at what was captioned as an office celebration. The hand wore a ring. Daniel's ring, the wedding band I had chosen with him at a jeweler in Columbus 4 years earlier. I did not cry when I saw that photograph, though I expected to. What I felt instead was a strange, clarifying anger, the kind that does not scream but organizes. I thought about every late shift I had picked up so we could afford the mortgage while Daniel's commission checks were unpredictable. I thought about every dinner with Carol where I had swallowed her comments to keep peace in a family I was trying to belong to. I thought about the car itself, the specific exhaustion of the years I had spent earning it. The deliberate choice to put only my name on that title because some instinct in me had wanted one thing that could never be taken. And now they were trying to take it. Not simply betray me with an affair, which was its own devastating wound, but to actively strip something I owned outright and hand it to the woman my husband had chosen over me. Using a bill of sale designed to make the theft look like a legal transfer. I understood, sitting with that realization, that this was not only a betrayal of our marriage. It was a calculated act, requiring planning, requiring Carol's help. Requiring weeks or months of quiet coordination behind my back while I continued to trust them both. I want to pause here and say something honestly. In the days after that discovery, I considered several responses that I am not proud of even in thought. I imagined confronting them in the driveway, screaming until the neighbors came outside. I imagined keying Vanessa's car, though I did not know which one was hers. I imagined simply disappearing, taking the Honda and driving until Ohio was behind me and none of them could reach me. I did not do any of these things, and I am glad. Because every one of them would have cost me leverage, dignity, or both, and given them away to paint me as the unstable one instead of the wronged one. Instead, I did something that surprised even me. I decided to become very patient, in a way that had nothing to do with tolerance and everything to do with strategy. The first thing I did was call my cousin Reagan, who is a paralegal at a family law practice in Columbus and has, over the years, developed a healthy suspicion of every man either of us has ever dated. I told her everything, the bill of sale, the late nights, Vanessa, the calendar discrepancies, Carol's strange questions about the title. Reagan did not gasp or offer sympathy first. She asked practical questions. Was the car titled solely in my name? Yes. Had I ever added Daniel to the title or insurance in a way that gave him ownership rights? No, deliberately no, for reasons I now understood better than ever. Had any actual sale occurred yet, meaning had money or the vehicle itself changed hands? Not yet, as far as I knew. Reagan explained something I had not fully understood. That because the car was solely in my name, no one. Not Daniel, not Carol, not a dealership, not a title office. Could legally transfer that vehicle without my signature or without committing outright fraud. Forging my signature on transfer paperwork. This meant that whatever plan they were assembling required either my cooperation, which they clearly did not intend to ask for honestly, or forgery, which was a criminal act, not simply a marital betrayal. That distinction changed everything for me. This was no longer only a story about a cheating husband. It was a story about a potential crime being planned against me by my own husband and his mother, and that reframing gave me a strange, steadying kind of clarity. I was not going to handle this as a wounded wife alone. I was going to handle it as someone protecting herself from theft. Reagan connected me with an attorney named Patricia Owusu, who specialized in family law with an emphasis on asset protection during separations. In our first consultation, Patricia told me something I have carried with me since. She said that people who are planning to deceive you rarely expect you to move quietly. They expect tears, accusations, a confrontation they can manage or minimize. The person who says nothing, who simply gathers information and waits, is the person they never see coming. So I waited. For nearly 3 weeks, I lived 2 lives. In one, I was the same wife Daniel had always known, asking about his day. Cooking dinner, attending a birthday lunch for Carol where I complimented her table setting and let her correct my seasoning without argument. In the other, I was documenting everything. I photographed the bill of sale before returning it exactly where I had found it, so nothing would seem disturbed. I began saving screenshots of the shared work calendar discrepancies. I asked a friend who worked at Vanessa's office, someone I knew casually through a mutual acquaintance and who had no idea of my situation, general questions about office gossip, and learned, without ever revealing why I was asking, that several co-workers already suspected Daniel and Vanessa were involved, and that Vanessa had recently told a colleague she was expecting to receive, quote, a really nice surprise soon from someone special. I also went on a weekday morning when I knew both Daniel and Carol would be occupied to the title office in our county to ask a direct question. I explained that I was the sole owner of a vehicle and wanted to confirm the current status of the title, in case anyone had attempted any transfer paperwork. The clerk looked it up and told me the title remained clean. No transfer had been filed, but she mentioned that a call had come in 2 weeks earlier from someone asking about the general requirements for transferring a vehicle title when the current owner was, quote, unavailable to sign. The clerk had told the caller correctly that in Ohio a title cannot be legally transferred without the actual owner's signature or a court order, except in specific circumstances like a deceased owner's estate, which did not apply here. I sat in my car outside that title office for a long time. Someone, likely Carol, had been actively researching how to get around my signature entirely. That was no longer a vague suspicion. That was evidence of intent. I brought everything to Patricia. She helped me understand my options clearly, without pressure, laying them out the way I imagine a surgeon lays out a treatment plan. Calmly, with real information instead of emotion driving the decision. I could file for divorce immediately, citing infidelity, and let the attempted fraud become a supporting detail in the larger case. I could, separately, report the attempted forgery inquiry to the police as a protective measure, creating an official record even before any actual forgery occurred, which would make it far harder for Daniel or Carol to attempt anything once they knew there was already a paper trail naming them as persons of interest. Or I could wait a bit longer, let them believe they still had the advantage of surprise. and gather enough additional evidence that when I finally acted, there would be no ambiguity left for anyone, including a judge, to question. I chose the third path, though not without real fear. Patricia warned me that waiting had risks. If Daniel or Carol actually succeeded in forging a transfer before I acted, undoing it would be more complicated, even though still not impossible given my clean title history. I decided the risk was worth it, because I wanted more than simply stopping the theft. I wanted the full truth exposed, cleanly, undeniably, so that when I left this marriage, I would leave it with my eyes open and my dignity intact. Not simply escaping one incident. The final piece fell into place 2 weeks later. Almost by accident, in the way that the truth sometimes arrives when you have finally created enough space for it to surface. I was at the grocery store on a Saturday afternoon when I ran into Daniel's coworker. A soft-spoken man named Greg who had always liked me more than he liked being caught in office politics. We made small talk in the cereal aisle, and at some point, clearly not realizing the weight of what he was saying, he mentioned that he hoped Daniel's, quote, big weekend thing went smoothly, since Daniel had been stressed about the timing. I asked, as casually as I could manage, what big weekend thing he meant. Greg hesitated, then, perhaps assuming I already knew since I was his wife, said that Daniel had mentioned finally getting the car situation handled before Vanessa's birthday. Since her birthday was that upcoming Saturday, and he wanted it to be, in Greg's words, a real surprise, done properly this time. With the title office cooperating, I thanked Greg for the cereal recommendation, walked calmly to my car, sat inside it, and allowed myself exactly 2 minutes to feel every emotion I had been holding at bay for over a month. Then I called Patricia. We moved quickly after that. Patricia advised filing a police report that same day regarding the earlier inquiry about bypassing an owner's signature for a title transfer, framing it clearly as a protective report given new information suggesting an imminent attempt. Because Ohio law is unambiguous about signature requirements, and because I had a clean paper trail of my sole ownership and no prior authorization ever given to Daniel, the report was taken seriously. The officer who filed it told me plainly that if anyone attempted to forge my signature on transfer paperwork, that would constitute felony forgery, separate entirely from any divorce proceedings. I also, with Patricia's guidance, called the specific title office branch nearest us and, showing my identification and proof of sole ownership, placed a formal flag on the vehicle's title. A protective measure some states and counties allow an owner to request when they have reason to believe an unauthorized transfer might be attempted. It would not stop a determined criminal permanently, but it would stop a casual walk-in transfer at a counter, which was exactly the kind of shortcut I suspected Carol had been hoping to find. Then I did something Patricia had not suggested, something that came entirely from my own decision about how I wanted this to end. I wanted them to try. I wanted Daniel and Carol to walk into that title office, or wherever they intended to complete this, confident that they had found a way around me. And I wanted them to fail publicly enough that there would be no version of events afterward where they could claim confusion or innocence. So I did nothing to warn them. I continued my ordinary routine that entire week, even attending a dinner at Carol's house on Thursday where she asked, with false lightness, whether I had been using the Honda much lately, since she had noticed it parked at odd angles in the driveway. I told her I had been busy with work and hadn't driven much. She smiled in a way I now understood completely, a woman satisfied that her plan remained undiscovered. On Saturday morning, Vanessa's birthday, I left the house early, telling Daniel I had picked up a weekend shift, which was true, though I had arranged my schedule specifically to be gone during the hours Greg had implied the, quote, surprise would be finalized. I drove the older backup car. I left the Honda in the driveway, keys inside a bowl by the door where they always sat. Because I wanted no locked door, no missing key, nothing that would let Daniel later claim he had been unable to proceed and therefore never truly intended anything. I later learned exactly what happened that morning through a combination of the police report follow-up and, eventually, a conversation with Daniel himself that I will get to. Daniel and Carol drove to the county title office together, bringing a bill of sale nearly identical to the one I had found under my seat weeks earlier, along with a photocopy of my driver's license that Daniel had taken, without my knowledge, from our home file weeks before, and a signature on the transfer line that was not mine, traced or forged closely enough to pass a casual glance. The clerk at the counter, following standard verification procedure, and likely primed by my earlier formal flag on the title along with my in-person inquiry weeks before, asked Daniel to step aside while she verified the paperwork more carefully. When the signature did not match the signature on file from my original title registration, and when the flag I had placed on the account triggered a supervisor review, the clerk informed Daniel and Carol that the transfer could not proceed and that, given the discrepancies, the office was required to document the attempt and refer it for review. Given an active protective flag and a matching police report already on file regarding a possible fraudulent transfer inquiry. I was at work when Daniel called me, his voice higher and faster than I had ever heard it, saying there had been some kind of mistake at the title office. Some kind of computer error, and could I please call them and clear it up because it was, quote, extremely embarrassing and he needed this handled today. I asked him calmly what exactly he was trying to have handled. He hesitated, then said something about handling paperwork for a friend, a story so thin it barely qualified as a lie. I told him I was at work and would talk to him when I got home. I hung up before he could say anything else, and I sat in the hospital break room for a moment, feeling something I had not expected to feel yet, a kind of quiet, steady relief, because the trap, if I can call it that, had worked exactly as it should have. They had walked directly into the consequences of their own plan, with no push from me beyond simply refusing to warn them. I want to be clear about something here, because I think it matters for anyone listening who might be in a similar position. I did not forge anything, damage anything, or lie to any official. I told the truth to the police and to the title office. Truth I could support with dates, documents, and a clean ownership history. I did not set a trap in the sense of manufacturing a lie. I simply stopped rescuing two people from the natural, legal consequences of a plan they had built entirely on their own. A plan that required either my ignorance or my forged signature. And when they chose forgery, they created their own downfall without any manipulation from me at all. That evening, I came home to find Daniel and Carol both sitting in my living room, waiting, the same way I imagine two people wait outside a principal's office. Daniel's face had lost its usual charm entirely, replaced by something closer to panic. Carol's face had lost its usual composure, replaced by something closer to fury. Though I would soon understand that fury was aimed less at herself and more, absurdly, at me. I did not raise my voice. I want that understood clearly, because I think the version of myself I am proudest of in this entire story is the version that walked into that room and simply said, evenly, that I knew everything, the affair, the bill of sale I had found weeks earlier, Vanessa's birthday, the forged signature, the police report already on file, and the protective flag already placed on my title. I watched both of their faces change in real time as they understood, piece by piece, that I was not confused, not guessing, but fully informed, and had been for weeks. Daniel tried first, predictably, to soften it, saying it was not what I thought. That he had been under enormous pressure, that Vanessa had been a mistake he was already trying to end. That the car thing had been Carol's idea more than his own. An attempt to shift blame that I found almost more insulting than the affair itself. Carol, for her part, did not apologize at all. She said, with the same brittle brightness she had used for 9 years, that she had only been trying to help her son find happiness. And that I had always been, quote, too controlling about that car. As if refusing to let your own property be stolen was a personality flaw. I told them both, in a voice I did not recognize as my own but have come to be proud of since, that I would be filing for divorce, that the police report already existed and would remain on file regardless of what happened between Daniel and me personally. And that if either of them attempted any further action involving my property, my finances, or my name, I would pursue the forgery charge fully, with documentation the department already had in hand. I told Carol that she was no longer welcome in my home, and that any future contact between us would happen only through attorneys. The weeks that followed were not simple, and I will not pretend they were. Divorces are rarely as clean as the moment of confrontation that triggers them. Daniel tried, several times, to renegotiate the terms of what had happened, alternating between apology and quiet resentment, occasionally implying that I had overreacted, that no actual harm had occurred because the transfer had failed, as though the failure of his plan erased the intent behind it. Patricia was invaluable during this period, reminding me repeatedly that his shifting explanations were a pattern to expect from someone who had been caught, not evidence that I was being unreasonable. The forgery attempt, once formally investigated, was taken seriously by the prosecutor's office, though ultimately resolved without a full criminal trial. Daniel, facing the real possibility of a felony forgery charge, agreed through his attorney to a resolution that included a formal admission of the attempted unauthorized transfer as part of our divorce settlement, along with a clear legal acknowledgement that the vehicle remained solely mine with no further claim from him, ever, along with covering a significant portion of my legal fees as part of the settlement. Since Patricia argued convincingly that his and Carol's actions had directly caused those costs, whether harsher consequences might have followed with a different prosecutor or a different judge, I do not know, and I have made peace with not knowing, because the outcome I received gave me exactly what I needed most: a clean, undisputed, legally documented end to any claim either of them ever had on what was mine. Vanessa, for her part, disappeared from the story almost entirely once the truth became public within Daniel's office, which it did, quickly, the way these things always do. I later learned, through the same co-worker network that had first tipped me off, that she had ended things with Daniel almost immediately once she understood the forgery had triggered a police report. Unwilling to be anywhere near a criminal investigation for a car she had never actually driven and, I suspect, had never truly wanted so much as she had wanted what it represented: being chosen over someone else's wife. Carol and I have not spoken since that night in my living room. Daniel has tried, occasionally, to suggest family gatherings that would require some version of civility between us, and I have declined every time, not out of lingering anger, though some of that remains, but out of a clear understanding that I do not owe anyone access to my peace simply because we were once bound by marriage. I kept the Honda. I want to say that plainly, because it matters to me in a way that has little to do with the car itself and everything to do with what it represents. Every mile I drive in it now feels like a small, quiet confirmation that the years I spent earning it, the shifts I worked, the vacations I skipped, the discomfort I tolerated in that dying old car before it, were never wasted, and were never truly at risk, because I had protected them long before I understood I would need to. I moved into a smaller apartment near the hospital about 4 months after that night. A place with a parking spot I do not have to share with anyone. In a building where no one has a spare key but me. I still work the cardiac unit. I still pick up extra shifts sometimes. Though now the money I save goes toward things I choose entirely for myself. A trip to see my sister in Arizona, a course I am taking toward a nurse practitioner certification I had put off for years while managing everyone else's needs before my own. I think often about the version of myself who sat in that driveway for 11 minutes. Holding a folded piece of paper that quietly announced the end of a marriage I had not yet allowed myself to see clearly. I do not regret the patience it took to wait. To document, to build a case instead of throwing a plate across a kitchen. Though I understand completely why some people in my position might have chosen a louder, faster response. For me, the quiet path was the only one that let me leave with everything intact. My property, my dignity, and eventually, my peace. If there is a lesson I would offer, it is this. Betrayal rarely announces itself all at once. It arrives in small, deniable pieces, a phone turned face down, a receipt that does not quite add up, a folder closed a little too quickly. And it counts on your reasonableness, your patience, your desire to believe the people you love, to keep you from ever assembling those pieces into a whole picture. Protecting yourself is not the same as being paranoid, and gathering the truth quietly is not the same as being deceptive. Sometimes the strongest response to someone trying to take what is yours is not rage, but clarity, patience, and the simple, steady decision to let the truth finish the job you were too exhausted to start. I still have that folded bill of sale, the original one I found under my seat, in a drawer in my apartment. I do not keep it out of bitterness. I keep it as a reminder that I trusted my instincts even when they were quiet. Even when believing them meant accepting something painful, and that decision changed the entire outcome of my life. If you have ever noticed something small that did not add up, a receipt, a closed folder, a phone that suddenly needed to lie face down, I would like to know. What did you do with that feeling? And what did it end up revealing? Tell me in the comments. And thank you for listening all the way to the end.